Hi guys, welcome back. So today we are looking at lesson 6, using diagrams to find the number of groups. So what we're going to be doing in this is using a tape diagram specifically to represent equal-sized groups and find the number of groups that results from that. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the screen here. So how many of these and that? We can think of the division expression 10 divided by 2.5 as the answer to the question, how many groups of 2.5 are in 10? Complete the tape diagram to represent the question, then answer the question. So let me take and get this set up. I'm going to zoom in to make this easier. So it's asking how many groups of 2.5 are there? So if we look at this, we've got 1, 2, and so if we draw a line right here, that would represent 2.5. Now, if we do that again, we've got a half, and then 1, 2. So then we'd have our line right here. So there'd be a second grouping. So there's another 2.5. And then once again, 1, 2. We have our half. So there's another 2.5. And then last but not least, there's the half, then there's 1, and then there's 2. So 2 and 1/2. So how many groups of 2.5 are in 10? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. The answer is 4. There are 4 groups of 2.5 that make up 10. So this tape diagram can be very helpful for those of you who really are visual learners who need to see how to take and divide these things, see how these groups work out of the whole, and really get the understanding of how many groups make up this whole with this size of a group. All right, we have another tape diagram we're going to look at. How many groups of 2 are in 7? So 1, 2. There's a group of 2. 1, 2. There's a group of 2. 1, 2. There's a group of 2. But what happens? So this is 2, 2, 2. But here we only have 1. And 1 is what portion of 2? A half. So we've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 3 and a half. So there are 3.5 groups of 2 in 7. Okay? So using these tape diagrams, like I said, they can be very beneficial in showing us our groupings and can be very helpful for you visually to understand these things. Okay, the next thing we're looking at, representing groups of fractions with tape diagrams. To make sense of the question, how many 2/3 are in 1, Andre wrote equations and drew a tape diagram. So here is 2 equations, question mark times 2/3 equals 1, and 1 divided by 2/3 equals question mark. Here's his tape diagram. So he's got his 1 whole, and then he's got a 1/3 and a 1/3. So there's one group of 2/3, but there's some leftover stuff. So for 1, it says, in an earlier task, we used pattern blocks to help us solve the equation 1 divided by 2/3 equals question mark. Explain how Andre's tape diagram can also help us solve the equation. Well, if we look at this tape diagram, we have 1 whole, so 1 whole plus 1/3, which, oops, I just spelled which wrong. Sorry about that. Which is half of 2/3. So 1 and 1/2. So that's kind of how we can take and use this tape diagram to see that our answer would be the 1.5, because we can visually see this 1 whole group of 2/3, 1 whole group, 2/3, plus the 1/3, because in order to make 1, if we've got it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, that'd be 3/3, which is a whole. And we know that 1/3 is half of 2/3, so 1 and 1/2 would be our answer. For number 2, write a multiplication equation and a division equation for each of the following questions. Draw a tape diagram to find the solution. Use the grid to help you draw if needed. So how many 3/4 are in 1? Let's see, where's our grid? Okay, our grid's down there. But we'll start with the multiplication equation. So question mark times 3/4 equals 1. There's one way we can write it, or we can write it 3/4 times question mark equals 1. Remember, multiplication is commutative, so we can flip it around and it works the same way. Now for the division, 1 divided by 3/4 equals question mark, and 1 divided by question mark equals 3/4. So now what we're going to take and do is look at it on a grid. So let me try to get this as straight as possible for you guys. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I know mine is not very straight in the slightest. I know you guys can do a lot better. It's hard to do it here on mine, but this represents one whole. And then if we're taking and dealing with 3/4, well, there'd be 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Our 3/4 would be this right here. And then we'd have 1/4 left over. So this is one group 3/4, and this is 1/3 group of 3/4. So with that being said, we have one whole group and we have a third of a group. So our answer to how many 3/4 are in 1 is 1 and 1/3. All right, the next one. How many 2/3 are in 3? How many 2/3 are in 3? So let's start with our equations. We'll have question mark times 2/3 equals 3. We'll have 2/3 times question mark equals 3. 3 divided by 2/3 equals question mark. And 3 divided by question mark equals 2/3. So there are 4 different equations because we can always switch things around within an equation. So now we want to take and look at our whole. So if we're taking and dealing with thirds, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hopefully that is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. There is our whole. So this is our one whole, or sorry, 3 wholes. So this represents 3. So then we're dealing with 2/3. So this is 1/3, 2/3. So there's one group. 1/3, 2/3. So here's 2 groups. There's another 2/3. So that's 3 groups. There's another 2/3. So that's 4. So we have 4 whole groups. And then we've got a little 1/3 over here. And so we've got half of 2/3. So it's 4 and 1/2. So you got to be super careful with the fractional parts. I know this is divided up into thirds. So we have 3 sections of 1/3 to get to our 3. And so this is technically a 1/3 is what this box is representing. But 1/3 is half of 2/3, and 2/3 is what we're really looking at dividing these into. All right, our next one. How many 3/2 are in 5? So question mark times 3/2 equals 5. 3/2 times question mark equals 5. 5 divided by 3/2 equals question mark, and 5 divided by question mark equals 3/2. So there are our equations. Now looking at our tape diagram, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. Okay, so for mine, I'm splitting it into, and I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can see it nicely, into halves. So this is 5 wholes. And so 3/2, this is 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. Our line 1, 2, 3. There's another one. 1, 2, 3. There's another one. So we have 3 groups. And then we have 1/3 of 3/2. So it'd be 3 1/3 for this. So there are 3 1/3 groups of 3/2 in 5. So this is using tape diagrams. Tape diagram is your keyword for this lesson. Tape diagram is your keyword for this lesson. Like I said before, they can be really helpful in taking and visualizing the process of dividing and putting things into groups. So very, very beneficial. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Have a great